Without further ado, Ali.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ali Al-Kafaji. I am actually an Iraqi British American married to a Korean in Pittsburgh. So if you connect all these, I think that will be tells you how Pittsburgh has been a great place for us. We've moved from London in about 13 years ago, and this is our home. We're going to talk about the healthcare segment, and I'm going to have the expert talk about this. As you all know, Pittsburgh transformed. It used to be a steel city. Now it is a health and tech and ed city. The best person I can tell of to start this segment is Derek Angus. Derek Angus is the chairman of the Department of Critical Care Medicine, the oldest department in the United States in critical care. Derek is a professor, a distinguished professor of critical care medicine with secondary appointment in health policy and translational research. He runs Charisma, and we've done a great job in remapping and do all things efficient in critical care. Derek has been in Pittsburgh since 1989, so I suspect he likes it a lot. He's from Scotland originally, and now he is a Pittsburghese. Derek has published extensively in the field of critical care medicine, several hundred articles in a very high impact journals, including the New England Journal of Medicine and the JAMA. Derek is a really transformational leader, and he was actually recently inducted in the Association of American Physicians. Derek also is the critical care editor or the associate editor of the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA. With that, please welcome Derek with me and have a clap.
Thank you very much, Ali. Thank you also to Ali, Simon, and everyone for inviting me here. He suggested that I love living in Pittsburgh, which was true until about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Just about that fifth interception when I thought, really? Okay, so let's see how I get slides up here. Perfect. All right, so people who live in Pittsburgh, especially limo drivers and taxi drivers, know that there's more than one way to get from the airport to downtown or to the east end of the city. It looks like you should take the Parkway, and most of the time the Parkway is a good choice. But every time you're trying to get back from the airport around 5 o'clock at night or so, there's usually tons of traffic, and it's at this point that the taxi driver, the limo driver says, I have another way. And there are several choices that can be made around getting off the Parkway and taking various back roads through parts of Pittsburgh that I have really no idea where I am. And I never really know whether I should say to the driver, I think that's a great idea. If I say yes, and we go into the back road, and then suddenly it seems like it's taking forever, I think I wish I had just stayed on the Parkway. And if I say, no, I'll stay in the Parkway, then we sit in a traffic jam. And the problem, of course, is that I can't be in two places at the same time. I'm faced with a choice, and I don't really know what will happen. That's been the case for years and years and years, and it's now been solved. Google Maps can give you a very accurate estimate of how long it would actually take. And the reason they can do that is because they have previously logged thousands of estimates from GPS of people's car phones about how long it takes to drive in these different journeys, along with live signals about who's currently hardly moving and who is moving. And so they can have predictive models that are pretty accurate about if you were to go left at this moment or go right at this moment, what the implications would be for you in time. Now, I don't pretend that getting from the airport to Shadyside is the world's greatest challenge. But it's an example of choices where it becomes critically important before you know what's happened, whether you should go and take the left path or the right path. And the problem is that for much of the world, there's no GPS signal. So for example, Theresa May can sit there and say, should I have called a general election or not? Equally, you can say, should I marry this person or not? There's no counterfactual. You don't get to not marry them and then work out which one worked out best. And this is particularly true in healthcare. I'm trying to advance the slide here, but it's not advancing. Click one more time. Am I doing something wrong? Here we go. So this is particularly true in healthcare, where you're offered metaphorically one treatment plan versus another, a red pill versus a blue pill. And because there's no Google map, you look to someone that you can trust to tell you which one you can do. And some of the times it might be Morpheus, but Morpheus isn't necessarily inspiring of trust. And so in healthcare, we look to alternative sources that we look to trust. We believe that we have some sort of super sleuth physician who knows everything. And we might have different ideas in mind, whether it's Marcus Welby or whether it's House. And we believe that they know the answer for us. They can somehow see into the future, and they can work out which is the best treatment. And again, I'm clicking here, and it's not. Okay. And the reason, so one of the problems about them trying to sell you this notion that they know what's right for you is that would assume that they know everything, that they're reading everything. Now, it turns out that the beginner of all of this sort of all-knowledge physician was William Osler back at Hopkins in the late part of the 19th century. Now, by the turn of that century, there were 1,000 papers being written per year in the entire biomedical literature. And it's believable that if you didn't go out at night, you could easily read 1,000 papers a year. And so if you had a high IQ and some time to spare, then you could probably say, no, I know it all, and I know everything that's out there. But it turns out that biomedical knowledge has been generated at a knowledge with a doubling time of 13 years. So it's that by the time Marcus Welby was on TV, if he really knew everything, what he wasn't telling you was that in order to know everything, he was reading 50,000 papers per year. And House came on the TV screens at the time that it was up to, again, I'm clicking here, up to 1 million papers per year. So there is just too much to know, and there's no way any one person can probably filter through and sort the wheat from the chaff. So what we really want to get at here is, from all the possible ideas that are out there, which is penicillin and which is snake oil? Now, this is not a new problem. It began actually to really take on a lot of attention when this good-looking Scotsman, Archie Cochrane, was asked to give a review of the National Health Service. And he wrote a book in 1972. He said, you know, the villains in the national healthcare system are the doctors themselves, who, as best as I can tell, just make SHIT up. They just do anything they want, and they think they know that it works. They said, you know, the true hero is the randomized clinical trial. That's the mechanism by which we can tell whether something actually works. What's he getting at here? What he's getting at here is this issue here. Let's go back to marriage. When the woman says here, you know, I think I want to get married because apparently married people are happier. To which the response is it that marriage makes you happy, or that happier people are more likely to get married? This is, of course, correlation versus causation. And this is the fundamental issue for sorting out snake oil from penicillin. Now, the way we try to do this with a randomized clinical trial is we take a whole bunch of people with a given disease, which in this instance might be, I'm single. All these single people have varying degrees of happiness. If you flip a coin, you can divide them into two random groups. And these two random groups, I'm speaking slowly so that the screens can keep up, these two random groups are identical in terms of the distribution of happiness among them. Even if there were things that made them happy or unhappy that you didn't even know about, you don't need to know about it, you just flip a coin and it will evenly divide it up. Then you can give half of them a treatment, and you can give the other half placebo, which in this instance is you could force half to get married, and then you can wait over time, and then you can see whether the marriage arm generates more happy people. And if it does, then you know marriage causes happiness. This is absolutely critical. I don't know whether it does or not, by the way. But the critical issue here is that randomization balances measured and unmeasured variables, and thus allows us to assume that any difference in outcome is caused by the treatment. Now, I know that's a bit geeky, but I cannot tell you how important this point is, and it comes back time and time again. All right, so people were trying to get at this for a long time. In fact, there's even the story of Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel in the Bible was about the first estimate to divide people into meat eaters versus vegetarians. But the first time we got close to a clinical trial was another Scotsman. There's a theme here. This is James Lind, working for the Royal Navy, and he's sitting on a boat with 8 able-bodied seamen who are not so able. They're all dying of scurvy, and he takes them and he divides them into 4 groups of 2, and 2 of them he gives lemons and limes, and they recover. The problem is he didn't randomly divide them, and he had misgivings about whether the lemons and limes had saved them or they were just less sick in the first place. And so 50 years went by after that observation before the Royal Navy finally thought there's something to this limey thing and started giving people lemons and limes. The first time we actually got to randomization was in 1948, when Adrian Hill, working with Archie Cochrane, did a study in severe pneumonia due to tuberculosis. And what they did was decide to randomize people in Britain to getting something called streptomycin. Streptomycin had just been invented in the United States, and it was shipping across to the UK in small aliquots, and they knew there wasn't enough for all the pneumonia, and so they decided it would be ethical to flip a coin around who would get the red pill and who would get nothing, the blue pill. And in this instance, it turned out that it was good when you had pneumonia to get treated versus not get treated. So that was the first randomized trial. The good news is that since then, it has really taken off. So we're now doing about 50,000 new trials each year across the world, and pretty much every FDA drug and device needs randomized trial evidence to be approved, although that may change with Scott Gottlieb. And we've also actually got much better at doing randomized trials. We remember to ask the patient's consent. We have good ethical oversight. We've sorted out a lot of the methodology, and we report it with great transparency. But, and life begins after but, Lordy, are there issues about randomized clinical trials. The first is the Goldilocks problem. The trials we do, we carefully cherry pick a population to do the trial in that isn't all people with the disease, and then when you get to the end of the trial, people say, yes, but that doesn't really apply to my patient. At the same time, while the trial is maybe too narrow, people also complain that it's not narrow enough. It's too broad because it still had some smiley faces and some less smiley faces, and you get an average treatment result, but you don't really know whether that would apply to your patient in particular. The second problem is it's not really red pill versus blue pill. Healthcare doesn't look like that today. We're not asking such simplistic questions. Rather, there's a whole plethora of choices to choose among. So, for example, today, if I have a patient coming into the ICU with severe pneumonia, the same patients as those patients from 1948, it's not just whether I give them antibiotic, it's choosing among multiple antibiotics and simultaneously choosing among multiple other things. In fact, the typical ICU admission order already has more than 50 things that I'll be giving to every patient. And I don't know which on this list really makes a difference, and I don't know whether if I give one thing, does that affect the effectiveness of something other. The other thing is that in order to sort all of this out, you still need people to agree to be in the placebo arm. No one wants to be a guinea pig. No one wants to end up being in what was the wrong arm. No one wants to be in the car that got off the Parkway when it turned out that the Parkway was the first fastest route to Shadyside. So, the hopeful solution, the promise, has been that we've now entered the era of digital medicine. And so surely we can fix all of this with big data. Big data, where this is taken on the left from the IBM Watson cartoon from ads that actually run during major sporting events, saying that, for example, at Vanderbilt, we can take every piece of clinical data, put it into the electronic health record, we can draw down data from your blood, we can measure all sorts of genetics, and then we can cram it through some big, large analytics program run by IBM Watson or Google Health or Amazon or whoever, and we can have it all appear live inside the electronic health record so that you and your physician can just hit the go button. There'll just be a recommendation of, we've sorted through everything and this is the best treatment option for you. Sounds great. The problem with this is that it's still largely correlation. There's no experiment and there's no randomization underpinning these large analytic algorithms. And one of the classic examples was the analytic algorithm that was going to predict flu that ended up actually over-predicting and massively mistaking how much flu there was in 100 out of 108 weeks. And while doing so, actually missed an entire H1N1 outbreak. In fact, Google Flu program was then shut up shop in 2014. So, what's to be done? How can we make randomized trials better, where we can keep the randomization, which we see to be sweet, but on the other hand, have it address the questions we care about? So we need to do two things. We need to have smarter trials that give personalized answers and consider multiple treatment options. And yet at the same time are also safer in that there's a lower chance of being in the bad arm, and so there's actually a better odds of being in the trial than out of the trial. So if we go back to the traditional RCT, remember at the start of the trial, you had equipoise, you didn't know. There was a 50-50 chance that A was better than B. At the end of the trial, we're almost certain that A is better than B. Okay, so what happened in the middle? Again, I'm sorry the slides are not advancing here. So what about in the middle? Okay, so imagine we were going to do a traditional trial of 400 patients. We were going to divide them 200 patients each, A versus B. And as we do this trial, we're 40 patients into the trial, and no one knows the answer usually, because at this point, everything is kept secret. The investigators don't know the results, they're not allowed to look at the end. Let's imagine we looked under the hood. We're 40 patients in, green is alive, red is dead. The 41st patient about to be enrolled is your uncle. Which arm would you like them to be enrolled in? You all have equipoise, you don't mind. Oh, it turns out there's a large inheritance coming from your uncle. Your feelings are not neutral at this point. How could we exploit that? Let's imagine we had a hunch that A was actually better than B. It's a real hunch. It turns out there's a 78% chance that A is better than B. Okay, so for the next 40 patients, let's roll the dice as a weighted dice, where 78 out of 100 times, it would actually land on A. We will play, it's still random, but it's not 50-50. So if we did that, I keep I'm clicking, if we did that, and our hunch was right, dun, 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 then what you would see here, if the hunch was right, then A would be massively outperforming B. You would get to the answer while exposing only a few more patients to B, so it would only be a few more unnecessary deaths. And at this point, you're at almost 100% certain A is better than B with only 80 patients enrolled, and you can stop the trial. All right, so this is something called response adaptive randomization, where you can take a patient, you can expose them to multiple different therapies, and the act of exposing them randomly, rolling the dice, generates data when you count who lived and who died. That data can go into a pre-specified statistical model, which can then change the randomization rule, and it can be happening live all the time during the trial, so that you can use it during the trial to start to preferentially make decisions, to start getting rid of C, giving more people B, to start dropping arms or activating arms. And I'm clicking as fast as I can. Whatever you do, you shouldn't run it on this computer. That won't be big data. And what I just advanced past was you can have different weights for different kinds of patients. So you can actually start sorting out what works best for what treatment. And this is what are so-called adaptive trials that are smart, and they consider many different treatment options, vary depending on the patient, and safe in that they are probably playing what is probably the winner, which makes it safer on average to be in the trial than out of the trial, because out of the trial it's just 50-50 the whole time the trial is running. What we would further want to do is then take all of that machinery and put it inside the EHR, so it's all happening live and giving live randomization inside the EHR. And that means we want to have a platform where you can do perpetual enrollment with continuous learning. You want it to be adaptive, so that you match the odds of success to the odds of assignment. Multifactorial, in that you're testing many treatments in many patients. Embedded, in that you're trying to embed it inside the electronic health record and align with care, and randomized so that you can still allow causal inference. And that is called REMAP, something that we're developing as an alternative to the RCT. There's already one that we've got funded. It's again in severe pneumonia, because severe pneumonia is still the #1 cause of death and disability worldwide. It's intended to eventually be global. It was designed here in Pittsburgh with colleagues in Texas, Utrecht, and Melbourne. It's already funded to launch in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. And we're simultaneously testing antimicrobial strategies, immune strategies, and ventilation strategies all at the same time. In this trial, patients are preferentially assigned to the best performing arm, so they're not a guinea pig. It's still random, but it's not 50-50. And the whole thing is triggered to be embedded from ICU admission orders. We're also looking in 2018 to start running several of these initiatives inside UPMC around enhanced recovery after surgery, around looking at the role, for example, of metformin as an anti-aging strategy. All right, again. So I've tried to suggest to you 3 takeaways. I have about 10 seconds left. The first is, I've tried to suggest to you, randomized trials find truth. Randomization is a beautiful thing. Hopefully you love it as much as I do by the end of this talk. You find your inner geek. But the current randomized clinical trial enterprise lets us down. Now, big data has come along. Do not let big data be cast as an alternative to the randomized trial. That is a false choice. Rather, use the digital era that's giving us big data as a strategy to enable novel randomized trial designs that retain randomization, yet are smarter and safer and enable a true learning health system. And with that, I offer some thanks and want to acknowledge people that have supported this work. Thank you.